Oh, thank you so much for passing that along. I really appreciate it. It's interesting. Our publisher, Steve Persanti at Berrett-Koehler, was our editor as well. And so I learned a tremendous amount from him. But he challenged us to write this book in 20,000 words or less.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I'll bet you can't do that. And that's, the last thing somebody needs to tell me. So I think there are 19,999 words in there.
Awesome.
But my son frequently teases me about it. He'll refer to it as the pamphlet. How's the pamphlet selling on Amazon, Mom?
That is great. And you know what? It does kind of, what's really nice, and this is just for our listeners, until they get their own copy, technically it's 112 pages. I mean, really. Yeah. I mean, there's more in the numbers, but there's, if you want to include the index and glossary and so forth. But actually it's only 112 pages, and I love the font that you used. It's not so tiny that you're like straining and you need the magnifier page viewer to see it. And
yes.
And you saved plenty of places for the they're not pictures. Like your it's not a word collage. It's there's another term for it. It eludes me at the time,
Wordle?
But
Wordle?
Yes, the Wordle. Mhm. And there's so many different nice features and things that you've laid out. It's not heavily worded, and yet I found it was just packed full of just amazing information for anybody, either a company or an individual as a person. Yeah.
Thank you for saying so. Well, I think it's in so many things in life, less is more. And
yes.
I think the value is in really simplifying, just stripping it back to what the basics are. And that's, this whole thing of career development has gotten so complicated. And there's so many layers and to-dos. And as a result, many managers and employees alike, they just throw their hands up and don't want to deal with it. And so we wanted to create an appetizing, easy way to approach what's really fundamental and important to almost all of us.
Well, you did that. You absolutely did. So, Charlie, I know you're itching to go here before we run out of time and we don't get to anything else. So you were going to share with us one of the first things, in the onset of the book, the gravitational pull of weakness.
Yes. Most people are disconnected from their strengths, but they strongly drawn toward their weaknesses. When you have a minute, literally 60 seconds, make a list of all your strengths and weaknesses. Chances are you will have more weaknesses than strengths on your list. In fact, in workshop after workshop, we witness a surprising human dynamic. When people are asked to create a list of their weaknesses, they do so effortlessly, smiling and sometimes laughing at the task. Ask these same people to list their strengths, and you see a very different response. Furrowed brows, head-scratching, grimaces, and genuine agitation. How odd. And I find that to be true of myself. We are always looking for our mistakes instead of our what we do best. I think that a lot of people do that. They are tendencies towards what they're not good at, and that's what we see in ourselves. But if you look at your strengths, and we don't find that many. So we'd like to know what other people think of us, of our strengths and our weaknesses. So how do you think about that, Julie?
I totally agree. And it's an amazing dynamic that we're so conversant in what we're not good at and how we screw up and all of the negative stuff, and we have to work so hard on the positive side for the most part. And, of course, it's important to understand where we might fall short of expectations, where we've got some soft spots, some areas that need development. I don't mean to minimize that. But what's equally and probably more important is really understanding and being able to appreciate and capitalize on our strengths. There's a tremendous amount of research. Zenger and Folkman have done a lot of work in terms of this strength versus weakness development arena. And the research would suggest that to elevate one's leadership, you can actually do more by taking what you're already good at to another level, to really focus on elevating a strength that currently exists to that next level of performance versus trying to take a weakness where, turning a weakness around can be a tremendous amount of time and energy. And so increasingly there's a school of thought that really says, hey, unless it's a fatal flaw that really needs to be addressed, maybe our time and energy is more appropriately invested, really cultivating and growing those strengths instead.
I totally agree, because Storytellers Campfire has done the very same with me. They have been very patient with me and my attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and they have really turned me towards what I'm best at, and that helps me see myself better and concentrate on the positive.
Yeah.
So yes, it's working out very well.
Oh, that's great.
I appreciate you saying that, Charlie. I know that there were a lot of things in the book, Julie, that I really felt a connection to, because we have tried some of these things with our host and with the website staff and studio engineers and radio personnel, and they're just the relationships in general. And one of the things that I was really drawn to in that part about the gravitational pull of weaknesses is one of the work associates that I worked with in a research company, which was my career of trade, but he was always very good at helping you see your strengths. He didn't focus on weaknesses, and even if a mistake was made, there was not a lot of time or energy spent on that. It was, what can we do in the future to make this better for you? Yeah. And I was always impressed with the style that he had. And it really helped me grow and develop, and I was constantly growing with the company and doing more and more and taking in more leadership type roles, to where I ended up in, being, selected with certain companies to actually coordinate international projects. But it was because of that very thing you're talking about. And the way he would do that.
And it sounds like he was really a growth-minded leader.
Yes,
and those
absolutely.
kinds of leaders totally they become talent magnets in organizations. People want to work for someone who's going to help shine the light on what they're doing well and magnify that, and not overlook mistakes and errors, but use those as opportunities to learn and grow rather than to be beaten about the head and shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know I don't want to run out of time. We also selected, Julie, you and I did in a prior conversation, the beginning of Chapter 4, because this is one of my favorite parts in the book about Feed Me. So, Charlie, do you want to go ahead and share that reading with us?
Yes, absolutely. Where do I stand? How am I seen? What do I think? I don't mean to sound needy, but a little bit of information could go a long way with me. An employee, perhaps yours? Feedback. How appropriate that word begins with feed. Because for many employees, information from others about how they're perceived and how they're doing is currently a severe source of malnourishment in today's workplace. Yet, in study after study, employees in every sector are starving for feedback. It's a pretty human response. We spend 40-plus hours each week at work dedicating our bodies, minds, and souls to the cause. A little attention is not too much to ask. Managers, beware. A low feedback diet may be harmful to the health of your business. Side effects can include, but not limited to, disengagement, stunted growth, lack of clarity, lost opportunities, loss of talent. Good people move on, either psychologically or physically, when their hunger for feedback isn't satisfied. And this loss of talent is completely unnecessary because feedback doesn't cost anything except a little genuine attention to others. It lends itself to literally any setting, face-to-face or virtually, with no more than a moment's preparation. And it isn't just the domain of managers. Anyone who is willing or asked can get involved. Feedback is a hindsight lens through which people can pass self-perceptions. And in the process, it yields a clearer vision of who they are and the value they bring. And I totally agree. If you don't feedback, let people know how much they're appreciated. And constructive criticism, I am all for that as well. When I need a little bit of checking, it might sting right there at the minute, but when you think about it and get it through your head about, what's going on and what you need to improve on, we're all work in progress, to improve your technique, whether it's, talking on the radio or doing whatever else, the material, outlines, or whatever you need to do, that helps you better your surroundings and whatever you're doing for your employer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Charlie, you're absolutely right. And in fact, the research would suggest that top performers, the folks who are really, contributing powerfully to an organization, they want even more of that kind of constructive feedback. They don't want just those pats on the back and the attaboy. They want to know, hey, what can I do better? Where is there a gap? What could I take to another level? There's a real appetite for this kind of information on the part of employees.
Yeah,
I really like I'm sorry, Charlie, go ahead.
No, I'm done. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I really like the part in this particular section that, shares that there is a malnourishment in this particular area. Why do you think that is, Julie? I mean, I've given this thought myself, anticipating this interview today, but I want to hear your thoughts. Why is that the case?
I think if you were to ask the average manager, the standard response would be, I don't have time. And it's hard to argue with that. Today's managers are more time-starved than any generation of leaders we've ever had in the workplace. When you think about changes to the workplace, downsizing, right-sizing, delayering, some managers have huge spans of control and are working their 40 or 60 or 80 hours just to keep their heads above water and do what they consider to be the basics of their work. And so layer in the expectation to give feedback or have a career conversation, and it's just more than they can contend with. And I think part of the problem there is that they've misconstrued what these kinds of conversations need to be like, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. We've over-engineered so much of this stuff, and there are forms and processes, and you have to sit down and take 30 minutes or an hour to have a conversation, and that is undoable given today's speed of business. So if we can help leaders, managers, supervisors understand that feedback or a career conversation can literally happen in a minute, in 90 seconds, in 2 minutes, you can deliver a message, you can ask a question, you can engage that employee, and use the windows of time when you're going to be passing, when you're walking down the hall to the cafeteria, those times when you're going to be chit-chatting anyway. If we can start to redeploy some of that time and position that time as being used in this way, then suddenly, it becomes much more doable for those busy managers.
I agree with that. I had a company, one of the first companies I worked with in broadcasting, And there was a lady who